Hi, I'm Ruth Molman from the Farmington Hills Historic District Commission, and I'm here with Mike Harrison, who is a councilman at this point in Farmington. He's also an historian. He was with the Farmington Historical Commission, and we're going to discuss that transitional period when Farmington changed from a rural community to a more urban type community that we have today. Mike, will you tell us where you lived and what it was like?
Well, I grew up over in an area between 9 Mile, or it was actually between 9 and 10 Mile and between Middle Belt and Inkster Road. My parents, they were married in 1940. In 1939, my dad had come out and purchased 8 acres of land on the north side of 9 Mile there. And beautiful piece of property, all heavily wooded with a stream and a valley and all this. They settled out there right after they were married. It's kind of interesting because they were living in Detroit at the time. They were building a home out here, and there was just absolutely no place for him to stay to come out and work on his home. And so he built a little cabin, which is still standing. Our property is still there, and this little cabin that he built is about maybe 8 by 12 feet. It was a place where he could make a pot of coffee and sleep at night. But that's where he lived when he was literally building this house, and he did it with the help of his friends that came out. So it was, there was not much in the way of things going on out in Farmington Township back then. It was still a budding community. World War II was kind of just getting started, and my father was not in the service, but he was too old at that point to be inducted. But so he was one of the few men that got to stay back here and and help build his home for his family. But it was probably one of the most interesting places I could have ever picked to land. I think back at the time when I was a little boy living way out in the sticks, if I wanted to go visit friends, I had to be driven somewhere practically, or ride my bike a long ways to school. I went to grade school at Our Lady of Sorrows, which was 3 miles or so away, and we used to ride buses back then. I actually went to kindergarten at William Grace, which is of course over on Shiawassee between Middle Belt and Inkster. And when I was in kindergarten, that was a 2-room school, and it was slated for demolition the year after I attended kindergarten there. So I can pretty much tell you that about 1953 was when the present school, that's the elementary school that's there, got started being built. But we would literally walk through valleys and across a little bridge to get to the school. It was pretty rural, and I think 9 Mile had just been paved at that time. One way I like to date people that have been in the area a long time is whether or not they remember there was a ski jump on 9 Mile Road, right, almost adjacent to where we lived, and that was built by an old Swedish gentleman named Henry Hall, who was an exhibition ski jumper before it was an Olympic sport back in the 20s. And my God, he jumped off of the ski jump that he had built well into his 80s, and everybody thought it was pretty incredible that he would take these leaps off this ski jump into this little valley here. But he was a rugged old guy, and was really part of some interesting local color. Yeah. So again, it was a very rural setting when I was growing up out there.
Now, your dad was a salesman, and
Yes.
He came out, and he became part of the community. He changed his profession, and you inherited the business.
Yeah. Actually, well, he was originally with like Kaiser Fraser during the war, and after the war, and working out at the Willow Run area there. And he became a salesman. At one time, he was a Mills Bakery truck driver, at one point. But yeah, he did start a company in 1958 selling advertising and promotional products, and operated out of the house there. And between that and planting 5,000 evergreen trees on this property, that's what we did. I have pictures of us cultivating these trees, and he sold them. You know, we had a sign out on 9 Mile Road, blue spruce and Black Hill spruce, and people would come out on weekends and we'd dig trees.
And they make Christmas trees out of them too.
Well, yeah, actually, we would lose a few at Christmas time. People would come in and cut them to get a free tree. We'd lose a few there, but for the most part, these were landscaping trees. People would come out and buy 4, 5, 6 foot tall blue spruce and ball them. And there's a lot of our trees that are still dotting around the community from people that bought trees from us.
And beautiful things.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and they're 50, 60 feet tall, some of them now. It's amazing.
Well, besides riding your bicycle, you had a horse too?
Yeah, we had livestock. We had a horse named Lassie. She lived to a ripe old age of about 25. I think I was about 10 years old when they had her put down. But we also raised sheep, and my dad had gotten started raising sheep from a guy by the name of Jim Randolph, who owned the property on 10 Mile and Middle Belt. And again, old timers would remember you could go and have pony rides at the Randolph home, and that home is still standing. It's been vacant and for sale for some time. But Jim said, you know, you've got so much property here, Fred. Why don't you get, you know, I'll get you some sheep, and they'll keep your lawn mowed. And so by the time we had our full-size, we had about maybe 12 to 14 sheep at any given time, and they would roam all over the valley, and they would actually keep the valley looking almost like it had been mowed. It was wonderful. Every spring we had baby lambs. People would drive out to our home to see baby lambs. We'd have little field trips. Cub Scouts would come to our home and see the baby lambs. We'd tap maple trees for syrup. My dad got to be a real syrup aficionado because we had a lot of maple trees that he would make sap out of.
Did you used to dip the sheep in the spring? I know Mrs. Spicer used to dip hers.
Yeah, she did, and say Jim Randolph was the one that knew the most about the sheep in the area. He would actually come out and cut them, or shear them, I should say. And he used an old pair of handheld shears, and I think that Ellie would dip hers, and I don't know if we had ours taken over there or not. I don't really recall that, but yeah, that was a common way of getting all the
cleaning them up.
Cleaning them up, yeah. And then sheep are not the cleanest of animals, nor are they very intelligent, I found.
Oh dear.
Oh, well, I just we used to have dogs that would come just running wild, and every now and then we would find a sheep that had drowned in our creek because they had just been run wild by dogs, and so it was a little upsetting. But
oh, I hope we don't have any more wild
oh,
dogs.
I don't think so. No, Farmington's changed a lot. Well, we used to be able to hunt right out our backyard. Again, I've got pictures of my dad and I just going out after school and I had a little 410 shotgun, and we'd go out and hunt pheasants right outside. You could hear them crowing all the time, and there were quite a few pheasants in the area back then. And of course, they don't like it too much when you go and shoot anything in Farmington Hills now, but back then it was pretty common. We used to be able to throw clay pigeons and do all kinds of things that you can't do now. So, different time.
They had a lot of game here. The Indians hunted it, and then
yes, the Indians hunted it, and this was a hunting ground for the Indians. This whole region. They didn't particularly set up their homes around here. They were more located out towards Orchard Lake and in that area where they had their actual homes. But this was a big hunting ground. Still a lot of trails that went through here. We had a gentleman every year. He'd come and he'd pay us for the right to trap muskrats on our stream.
muskrats.
Muskrats, and he would come out every every spring, just when the snow was melting, the muskrats would start emerging from hibernation. He would set traps up and down our stream, and he would probably get, I don't know, 30 or 40 muskrat pelts out of us every year.
I wonder what kind of coat they are. I've never heard of a muskrat coat. They must have changed
Actually,
the
muskrat
name.
was a pretty popular. It was a trim type of fur, and nobody really advertised. It wasn't a glamorous thing to make a coat out of, but they did make. I understand they did make certain coats and hats and that type of thing out of muskrat.
They must have called them something else to make them more glamorous.
Yeah, I'm sure they had a
a name for
had a
them.
very glamorous name for it, but.
They had beaver out here too, I think.
Yeah,
at one
not
time.
not to where I had ever seen them. I think the beavers had been trapped out long before I ever came along. But the muskrats were definitely still. They still are. We still see them out swimming around.
You know, we saw a possum there too, and
Yeah. Unfortunately, the only time you see possums when it's too late and they're on the highway. But
ooh.
yeah, the highways and of course the building up of the area has done a lot to reduce the animal population around here.
I understand they're still here. We just don't see them.
Well, they're learning survival skills, and hopefully the ones that are staying off the roads.
And the deer, of course, are here.
We get deer through here, sure, absolutely,
Lovely.
absolutely. They follow the streams.
You were telling me about the businesses and how those have changed. You said that you used to go into town to a soda shop or a...
Well, the best place to go for a hamburger and a malt used to be Himmelsbach's in downtown Farmington. That was a real famous little local spot. It's not unlike the Guernsey type place that's over in Northville there. But and again, that's something that burned down and was never replaced. It was replaced with some other stores. And a couple of things that I still think are kind of funny. If you go into El Nibblenuk restaurant over at 8 Mile and Grand River, it's a marvelous Mexican restaurant, but when it got started, it was actually pretty much where the McDonald's is on Grand River and Middle Belt. And it was called the Nibblenuk. And it was a burger and malt and French fries place, kind of a drive-in place for many years, and then it burned down in the early 60s. It was purchased, the land was purchased, and then he resold that, moved the location down to his present location, and opened up as a Mexican and called it El Nibblenuk. So it was, if anybody's ever wondered if nibble and nook are Spanish words, they're not, but it is, yeah, it's still one of our favorite restaurants. But as I say, it's just, I think it's kind of funny to see they've got pictures of the old place inside the lobby there. Yeah, when we wanted to, the Farmington Shoe Repair, I still have fond memories of that. Andy, the current owner of that, has owned it, well, since I was a little kid. He's had that a long, long time. But there was an old Armenian gentleman named Sam and his wife that had that. And we used to go in to get our shoes fixed, and I would watch this little old lady on a treadle sewing machine putting soles on shoes. And
Do we still fix them?
Hmm?
Do we still fix them?
I still do. I still do, but let's say it's still a great place. But I just remember I'd never seen a old-fashioned treadle sewing machine in daily operation. But that was pretty much a going concern back in the 50s. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I brought something that's kind of fun here. This is a phone book from January of 1942.
Wow.
Now this is something that's been in our family for a long time, and anybody that I ever show it to that's from the area just has a really fun time looking through this. Now this takes place a month, or this was printed a month after Pearl Harbor, so to give you kind of a context. But just the cover of it, now this was put up by Michigan Bell Telephone. Kurt Hall was the Ford Mercury dealer. Hatton's Farmington Hardware, that is where the Kitchen Master store is up in downtown Farmington. Some great old ads. Gives you all the instructions on how to make a long distance call and so on. I was shocked at the number of dude ranches that are that are in the area, pretty much out in the North Farmington area, along 13 Mile, these old horse farms and dude ranches, and that's what they called them back then.
They were known for their horses here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You had one of your own.
Yeah, yeah, we sure did. And let's say this is just kind of a fun thing to do because it is a good snapshot of what businesses were in operation at the time. There were very few businesses, of course, that are still in existence. Fent Building Supply goes way, way back. They're, of course, in here, and Heaney Funeral Home, which is now Heaney Sunquist. Mr. Heaney's funeral home was just a spectacular thing for us when we were kids. It was just such an amazing, because he had a lawn that was like a putting green at a golf course. I'd never seen anything like that. It was much larger because Farmington Road hadn't been widened at that point. So just, little things that you, but probably no event had a bigger change on Farmington in this area than World War II. It was a place waiting to become a suburb when World War II came to an end and all these GIs came back and wanted to find property and build a home and raise a family, and you can just see what a huge push there was out into this direction after the war. So that's probably what really spurred a lot of the.
That's a turning point then, you think?
To me, that certainly was a key turning point, just the availability of transportation to and from the city and so on.
Okay, we're going to take a brief break right
Sure.
now and go on from there.
There's a better way to have fun with history. Visit americaslibrary.gov. Log on, play around, learn something.
Plastic ones last longer.
Pork bellies close steady due to speculation that demand for bacon-related products.
Read me this one, Daddy.
Okay, honey. The less art kids get, the more it shows. Are yours getting enough? Art. Ask for more. AmericansForTheArts.org.
You were telling us about Heaney Sunquist, and they, I guess Mr. Heaney was the one that brought music to our schools.
That's what I understand, and I think it was kind of a sponsorship thing. You probably know a little bit more than I do because I didn't really get a inside view of Farmington School. They say I was at Our Lady of Sorrows, and then I went into Detroit to high school. So.
And then you went on to college from there? Or?
Yeah, I went to college up in Minnesota actually, and went to St. Thomas College up there in St. Paul and University of Minnesota. And then I came back here afterwards.
Now you were talking about Detroit and the close relationship you had growing up, how you took advantage of all the cultural things.
My parents were very interested in our cultural exposure. It was, I think back and it was amazing. It didn't seem that extraordinary to us, but every Saturday my dad would put us in the car and we'd head down to the Detroit Institute of Arts. We would be taking art classes down there. It was just wonderful I still think it's one of my favorite places in town to go visit, and just brings back a lot of memories. But going to the Historical Museum, the Detroit Historical Museum, has a wonderful display down in the lower level. It's like an old main street with cobbles. That was just a really neat place for a kid. You could kind of picture what it would be like to grow up around the turn of the century, and it just seemed very real to us back then. We had to go downtown Detroit to go to the dentist. We used to go. Our dentist was in the Fisher Building, and we would drive all the way from. And this is before the Lodge Freeway. This is when you had to take Grand River to West Grand Boulevard and use all these surface streets. I still think that's a good way to get downtown, especially when there's traffic on all of our freeways. But
Well, the surface streets are still good, and the area is still good.
Mm-hmm.
You used to go out to Cranbrook too. Now you're
Cranbrook was another favorite spot. My mom and dad were both very interested in the naturalist movement. Of course, we lived in I didn't realize it, but we lived in a nature preserve. It was, but we used to go out to Cranbrook, and they'd wake us up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take us to Cranbrook for bird walks. And we'd be done with the bird walk. There was a wonderful old gentleman named Walter Nickel that was a naturalist out there. And Walter would teach us all the names of the birds, and we could identify them by their songs and so on. And then we'd be back at school by 8 o'clock, you know.
Were you awake?
No, I don't think so. And yeah, I don't think, and I don't remember going to school and bragging to the other kids about where I'd just been either. I think that they wouldn't have understood, and I'm not sure I did either at the time. But I think back, and it was just it was a wonderful experience to grow up that way. And as I say, my father became known kind of as the Birdman of Farmington. Channel 7 had done a nice piece on him quite a while back. He was very interested in the birds and the wildlife on the property there, and of course he would have chickadees just coming and eating out of his hand. I've got pictures of him holding a chickadee on his pipe, eating a sunflower seed out of his mouth. You know, it was just, he was quite a guy to watch in action when he was around his birds. You know, so
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty interesting.
And they had a naturalist club that was here.
That's right, and yeah, he was a part of that. There were a number of naturalists in this area. The one that really comes to mind was a Dr. Bob Douglas, who did quite a bit of writing. And there's a very nice book that tracks the natural history of Farmington and how our topography and geology kind of evolved after the glaciers, and then the various animals that, you know, we used to have mastodons or mammoths or something that used to roam this area. They have discovered ancient bones and things like this. So
We tried to find out if maybe there were hunters out here looking for those mastodons, but they haven't found any evidence of that yet.
Not yet. But they found evidence of the animals themselves, and yeah. So as I say, this Farmington Naturalist Group was quite an interesting way to find out more about the area like that.
I think the book is still available, The Natural History of Farmington, that the Farmington Historical Commission put out. And I think they can still get the book at the City Hall.
He would certainly be a starting point to locate. I know I have my own copy already, so
I don't know if anybody wanted to,
oh yeah,
to know about the natural history
Sure,
from
sure.
the group. No, we have our own naturalist now at the Heritage Park.
That's right. That's right.
Does a terrific job.
Yeah, Joe Derrick is so knowledgeable and has been so eager to share his knowledge with the community via the cable, and there have been some nice programs.
And we have our own walks now.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. I need to get in touch with that.
Walks out there, walks in Cranbrook. It's a
Right.
great learning experience
Sure.
here.
Well, now I live in downtown Farmington, so I'm a little more urbanized. But it's funny. I think I have more critters living where I live in downtown Farmington than I did when I was living out in the farmland there, because it seems like we're always doing battle with chipmunks and squirrels and raccoons, and certainly.
You've got a stream behind you, don't you?
Yes, where I live in Farmington, we live at the top of the hill that goes down to Shiawassee Park. So.
You live in Emily Butterfield's little cottage.
Yes, in her
which is-
cottage.
Which was never a cottage as such.
I don't think so. That was what it was called. That's what she called it back then. But there's an interesting history to that home and that corner, because that's where the Methodist Church was originally standing in downtown Farmington. And in 1915, the church burned, and when they decided to rebuild, they thought it would be better to rebuild down at Grand River, and where its current location. And so Wells Butterfield was Emily's father. He was actually Farmington's first mayor when Farmington, the city, was first incorporated. He was an architect, as was Emily, his daughter. She was the first registered architect, female architect in the state. And the Methodists gave Wells that parcel of land at the top of the hill there, Shiawassee Hill, as a fee for designing the Methodist churches in the area, because he had done other properties as well. So he built the large home, the large gray home that's right on the corner, and then gave Emily a little parcel right next to it where she built a little two-story, you call it a cottage. And it doesn't resemble that original cottage. You could still find, you could still see it. It's just the two-story portion of the house. But our house has been added on to and modernized quite a bit by everybody who's lived there since then. But it's a lovely home, and there's some great history in it. Our mantle in there is made from beams from the horse barn that was at the Methodist church. The stones in the fireplace are supposedly from 50, or at the time it was 40 some odd different states. I think it was 48 by then. So the stones in the fireplace even have a history of their own. And let's say the original floors are still there, but otherwise, let's say it's been had at by a lot of subsequent owners, but it's still a very charming home, and it has a lot of history to it. It's a fun place to live.
Well, we have to swing with the area. I mean, bathrooms and kitchens are always getting it.
Yeah, and
they're always being updated.
Fortunately, I say we've been able to keep the flavor of the home, I think, inside and out. So.
You were telling me about another experience you had living when you were on 9 Mile Road in that transitional period. You had some interesting neighbors.
Well, I told you about the guy with the ski jump, and I say the neighbors back then were I don't think there was anybody that had less than an acre of land, and everybody had some form of big gardens, of course, they were growing, and some people were still farming. I'm just trying to think of some of the.
You had the Boys Republic there.
Well, the Boys Republic came on probably in the mid-50s. Originally the Boys Republic was over at 9 Mile and Inkster. There's a subdivision there, I think. I call it still Forest Park, but it was a big spooky old home, and I think it had been abandoned by the time I ever noticed it. But then they moved the Boys Republic to that beautiful piece of property. But yeah, we used to see quite a few kids that would take little leaves of absence from Boys Republic to cut over to the store on Middle Belt and buy cigarettes or whatever. We always thought that anything that ever went wrong in the area was probably because of the Star Boys Republic boys, but actually it's probably us. But yeah, it was quite a wild and rural area still when they first came out.
It was supposed to really help these youngsters
by
getting them into the country, they said.
Getting them out of the urban environment out into the country and giving them some, I think, just a glimpse of what life was like outside of where they were growing up down in the city there. And again, it really did accomplish that. And Boys Republic has always had a wonderful mission. Now it's Boys and Girls Republic. They've gotten politically correct now, but yeah, and it still, I think, is a marvelous institution with a great mission. It still looks so pretty in the fall when all those beautiful trees start to turn.
Started by Henry Ford.
Yeah, that's right.
His own.
Yeah, he had a couple of interesting opportunities out in this area. The Botsford Inn being the other one. Yeah.
Now the hospital has it, and hopefully they'll keep it going for us.
We're all waiting to see what happens there.
Well, I think they're out of money at this point.
Well, we'll wait and see. But yeah, Botsford's got priorities ahead of the salvation of the Botsford Inn right now. But hopefully they have done at least a job of putting a new roof on it and maintaining the structure. So we're all looking to see some good come out of that place.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Sort of. Mm-hmm. And that lends the area that goes back to when we had roads that it took a whole day to get into Detroit. And here you were buzzing back and forth to take art lessons.
Well, it wasn't quite that bad when I was a kid, but like I said, Grand River was paved then, but it certainly wasn't as wide or a boulevard back then. Yeah, we could still take buses you could still catch a bus from Farmington and pretty much go anywhere you needed to, but transportation has certainly changed.
Farmington to Redford to,
Yeah.
were there express buses to downtown Detroit?
I think there was an express bus that ran. I used to take the bus home from Redford. I was going to school at Catholic Central when it was over on Outer Drive in Greenfield, and we would get over to 6 Mile and Grand River and catch a bus from there into Farmington. So
You and your brother?
yeah, yeah. My brother is an interesting fellow to talk to. He's a reference librarian at Henry Ford Community College, and he probably has as much knowledge as anybody around here. But between the two of us, we can talk for way too long on a lot of subjects. Yeah.
Oh, that makes it a lot of fun, and that you're both interested in the history. And
Oh yeah. Well, he has
doing so much with it.
his home is on 9 Mile, right across the street from where we grew up. He bought 3 acres from that was actually a home of some very interesting people when we were growing up. Their name was Gadabush, and he was an engineer with Detroit Diesel. That he and his wife had fled Germany just before 1939. So they came out here to this area about the same time. They built this gorgeous little Bavarian home, which still stands. My brother and his wife have very lovingly put this home back in its original condition. It's just it's a neat place. He's also got a valley and a stream and everything, so yeah. We like streams in our backyard, I guess.
Yeah. They're wonderful to have.
Oh, yeah.
Did your father participate in the war awareness here in Farmington? The they observed for planes and things.
He wasn't really part of that, no. When the war first broke out and the U.S. became involved, my mother had become very ill. She had tuberculosis, and it was at a time when that was almost a death sentence, and she wound up spending over a year and a half in the hospital in Herman Kiefer down in Detroit. And so any involvement that he had was pretty much focused. That was the only place that had really adequate care facilities for that at the time, and so it was something she finally emerged from and was cured of. But again, that came at a very critical time. That's why I didn't come along until 1947. I think they were too busy trying to build a home and stay alive out here. Yeah.
She was a medical technologist. Did she pick it up there?
She actually had gone to Marygrove College and had her med tech certification before that happened. But yeah, in fact, she worked down at Herman Kiefer Hospital and then Old Grace Hospital, and ultimately she wound up working for Dr. Gadbaugh here in downtown Farmington. Dr. Gadbaugh was a very well-known family practitioner here in downtown Farmington, and yeah, so she worked for him for a number of years and other docs. So that was kind of her thing. That and keeping the books at my dad's company. Yeah. That was her other full-time job.
Keeping the city together. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for coming and coming through this transitional period with us at Farmington.
Well, it's been a fun thing to observe. I've been really appreciating being a part of the Historical Commission, because it's just I've been able to learn more than ever of what it used to be like, and hopefully we're going to recapture some of that flavor in downtown Farmington in the future. So again, thank you.